Hey, economics class, Dr. Seiwert here, talking about last week and this week. So, hopefully you've had a little bit of time to immerse yourself and learn the world of economics. It's a little different than probably some of your other business or even your accounting classes if you've had anything like that. But kind of a cool thing to know is if you're in that, if you end up majoring in that, economists make a lot of money because it's kind of like the weather. You don't have to be right all the time and you still get paid. How's that? Because, there's probably a lot of predictions after the pandemic, but we're kind of seeing some of them pan out and some of them not. So anyway, good thought for if you're thinking about maybe doing a job later on being an economist. So anyway, just want to address the first few chapters. You might have noticed if you in both classes, chapters 1 through 6 are the same in both classes. That's because everybody kind of needs either a starter, just to learn a little bit more if you don't know too much, or just to have a foundation to go on with either the micro or the macro. So the macroeconomics is more of a total world global kind of thing. Whereas in micro, we look at maybe smaller instances as we figure out our supply and demand. So you probably read that the economics is more of a social science. Logic would have said to me when I was taking this class, it was a math class because I did a lot of math and a lot of graphs. And so one of the things I wanted to bring to you is you can look at the graphs and you can figure out the homework and stuff. I've made the homework so it's not laborious, I hope, as far as I've taken probably most of the graphing out. You have excellent graphs and that kind of thing in your book. I didn't feel like you needed to spend all your time learning how to use the drawing tool, which has been really hard sometimes. Even I get in there and I don't get it quite right. So my thought on this class is to really learn the material. Now if you go on, you're going to see graphs, and so I'm just telling you that now. It's kind of like math to me. It's graphs. It's a lot of graphs, but they're in your book, so I feel like you can look at that and look at the material versus having to draw a lot of graphs. So that's how I've tailored this. Anyway, so like I said, it's a social science, and what we are trying to answer is, what do we need, how are we going to get it, and who is it going to be sold to? So when I took economics, we always had the graph of guns and butter. So if people wanted more butter, then they weren't going to make as many guns. Say if we're talking about if it's the same company right now. Or if maybe they want more guns, which might be the way that it is right now, people are using less butter. So it was one or the other. We couldn't have everything of both. If we did, it would be called an equilibrium. Logic is going to say we're probably not going to have the exact quantity for the exact amount of products wanted. And if you can figure that out, you will rule the world. So anyway, a lot of figuring out economics is the demand, the supply, and the demand. And so we are ruled by what we would call a rationality assumption. People don't want to make wrong decisions because we don't want to hurt ourselves, but sometimes we do. Let's look at the stock market, for example. We want to make good decisions in the stock market. Sometimes we don't, and then we're worse off. We didn't try to do that, but sometimes it happens. So the same thing can be true in our supply and demand. Maybe we want, as a company, to do more production, but we have to really look at the numbers. It's kind of like if you want to go buy a car. You have to look at your numbers to see if you can afford it or not. So it would be nice if we could have everything, and there would be everything there we wanted, and all the price that we could, that we wanted it to. But that's not how it works. Sometimes we run into something that we call scarcity. And for example, this is kind of interesting, I thought, was a lot of cars can't be made because they can't get the computer chips to do things. So sometimes they're making cars without different options, or they're going on and just not making things. So I don't know if you've gone by like new car lots. A lot of times there's nothing there because they don't have anything that's coming from the factory. Obviously they want to sell things, but it's just not there. So my thought is, let's not buy a car right now unless you need it, because the prices are going to be high and you're just not going to have the selection. So anyway, that can be a scarcity of resources, and the buying public is suffering for that. There's nothing they can do. They're just dependent on other people to get them these things. So our demand is not being met for that particular item. And so one other thing is opportunity costs. If you're studying or doing some of the homework, that means you're not doing something else. And I know a lot about opportunity costs because I've done a lot of studying when I wanted to do something else. Paid off in the end to do the studying, so I just want to let you know that. But that would be an opportunity cost. If I was studying, which I tended to leave my studying for a Sunday, then I wasn't really doing anything else. So I just knew my Sundays weren't going to be anything but a study thing. And so that was my opportunity cost. I could have been doing a lot of other cool, fun things, but I didn't. My payoff at the end was having my degree and also, getting a better job. So that's the opportunity cost. Now, you might be taking multiple courses. Which course do you study for the most? Well, that's something you have to figure out. So maybe this class is hard, but you have another class that's easy. So you kind of allot your time between the two. So if you're studying for my class, you won't be able to study for the other class. You just have to figure out what your opportunity cost is. What are you going to lose by doing one thing over another? And that's with any choice we're making in life. If we want to go to the movies, do I want to pay $10 for the ticket, or do I want to just stream it at home? When I went to see a musical, I watched it on the big screen because that's the way I look at a musical. But other people looked at it on their phone. It's nice to have the choices. So it just depends on what opportunity costs and what we're comfortable with. So as I said, we come down to supply and demand. And it's always going to be supply and demand. And right now during the pandemic, there are a lot of things that we don't see necessarily like we have. For example, I might have said this to you in my last video. I went to one of the little Walmart marketplaces, and I was just walking down the ice cream aisle, and half of it was empty, which it's August, so logic tells me they would want to have it full so they could make more money. But it's also telling me their supply chain maybe isn't working, or there's some other problem. So I'm thinking, well, Walmart's one of the biggest companies, so logic would tell me they would get it if they could. So for some reason they weren't getting it, and they're losing those sales. So a lot of companies are probably going through the same thing. They're losing sales because of the supply chain and other things that we can't help because of the pandemic. But also it can be the supply and demand. So when you're looking around, like I said, cars, there's not much of a supply, but there is a demand, because if you need a car, you need a car. Ice cream, not so much. You can just say, okay, I don't need ice cream, But if I'd been gone in there looking for ice cream, I probably would have been, okay, I'm going to have to go somewhere else. I'm not really happy about this. And that's what customers think. So do you want your customer to change stores because of a problem like that? I wouldn't think so. So that's how a lot of problems end up costing companies money. And like I said, if we want to get the perfect supply and demand, it will probably never happen. You're not going to have people that are going to order the perfect number and you have the perfect amount made. Let's just look at aircraft even. There were a ton of orders last year until the pandemic. Okay, so then the supply was like totally outnumbering the demand. Nobody could fly. So it's very cyclical. And obviously right now different things are, having a big supply and demand problem. So also your book talks about minimum floors, that kind of thing, floors and ceilings, and a lot of times governments will set that. Like my family are wheat farmers, and if there wasn't some kind of a support for that product, they probably wouldn't make any money, because there's a lot of wheat, and this way it is all over the world. So we try to sell it to other places, but our farmers need some kind of a help with that. So that's why the government kind of walks in on supply ceilings, or on the floors as well, because if we have ceilings and floors, then it ends up being that the market is not a free market. Free market being you asked for a product, you get a product, and then we deal with, if there's enough demand or supply for that product. So anyway, we'll be going through a lot of different subjects. One of the ones that I find interesting is unemployment when we get to it, and also minimum wage when we get to it. So I hope you learn some different things that as you go through, even if you're just learning for yourself how to vote, or maybe you're going to invest in a 401k, you take some things out of this class that will help you with those things, or you will go on and be a business person. And certainly supply and demand is something that they're looking at all the time. So have a great week. Please let me know if you have any questions. And I did want to address the packback. You guys did fabulous. I'm going to be reading all of them, and I comment on some of them, not every one of them. But just a reminder, you want to pose a question about the economy, and then you will respond to 2 other people what their post was. So when you write your question, you should have some kind of a source that tells me that it really was something that you looked up or had a question about and you looked up. I look up things all the time because I don't necessarily know from one minute to the next, let's say, what the stock market's doing. So I would have to look up something today if I was going to talk about the stock market. And that's okay, we're just looking up to see different things. But it's best to have some kind of a reference when you post your article or your thoughts, and try to stick to economics. It can be national, it can be local. A lot of times the local ones are pretty interesting, and I don't necessarily know about everything, so I love to read to see what you guys are thinking about. So to me, those are the easy 15 points every week. Just you're writing something and then you're responding to 2 different people. So I've learned a lot, like I said, in these discussions, and I hope you do too. And anyway, if you have any more questions, it looked like everybody was pretty much on the packback, and if you ended up being on a wrong one, I found your post. So anyway, have a great week. We'll talk later.